The growth of vegetation made it even more difficult for the fire-bellied overlords to look for the remaining brain cell, the one brain cell that can save them from the dark overlord of Crustacea.
Greetings, fellow lifeforms. Back in April, a mysterious and confused entity called the Eye of Migration teleported me away from the Microverse and into the deserts of Egypt, which I call home. Due to my absence, the Microverse went into maintenance mode. And while all the fauna are being well taken care of by my amazing lifeform partner, the flora lifeforms have been left to reign over their respective territories. Let's go see what the Microverse is looking like today.
Our first stop is Kukuru Mountain, which had quite the variety of vegetation. It is also home to Illumi, the elusive assassin. He is by far the most adorable ball python I have ever seen. You can disagree. And this is what Kukuru Mountain looks like today. Creeping figs have taken over completely, but the snake plant is not doing so well due to a certain bulldozer bulldozing all over it. Bulldozer. The parlor palm and the pothos aren't doing the best, but they are hanging in there. I planted two variations of the creeping fig, the variegated type and the non-variegated, which seems to have been the dominant type. It's even creeping towards the dry side of the enclosure. This was a waterfall feature that I had made, but a certain someone who shall not be named kept pooping in the waterfall, so it had to be dismantled and replaced with a normal water dish. Next on our tour is the land of overlords, the nation of Crustacea, or the nation of Amphibia. I'm not too sure on the politics as I have been absent, but the nation of Crustacea Amphibia, yeah, sure. Yeah, the nation of Crustacea Amphibia was overgrowing with moss. All the plants were compact and everything was well delineated. Now, this is what it looks like today. Now, while all the plants are sort of centralized towards the light source, everything has overgrown completely. The Dieffenbachia specifically is kind of warped from how much it's grown. The pink syngonium is doing great, growing straight up towards the light. And surprise, surprise, the Microverse is just exploding. In fact, it's going into the Great Lake of Amphibia. Not only is the Microverse drinking from the lake, but the ficuses and the turtles are as well. The impossibly to pronounce fern Evergemensis, the variegated brake ferns, is also doing very well. The little Cryptanthus pup is no longer a pup. It is a fully grown earth star now. Due to this lush canopy, not much light is able to penetrate to the forest floor. The moss is almost completely eradicated, but any semblance of moss that you see here is most probably a frog. The growth of vegetation made it even more difficult for the fire-bellied overlords to look for the remaining brain cell, the one brain cell that can save them from the dark overlord of Crustacea.
You shall subscribe!
Next in our journey is the Guild of Gaconia, home to the amazing Treffy, the highest ranking member of the Guild of Gaconia. Okay, he's the only member of the Guild of Gaconia, but he is awesome. The Guild of Gaconia matured the best, in my opinion, out of all of the enclosures. In the beginning, there were just patches of moss here or there. No plants were established, but enough plants were established to give Treffy some cover, as they are arboreal species. And this is what the Guild is looking like today. The jewel orchid has left its nestling place and wandered the forest floor, and the Dieffenbachia is growing gloriously. This should provide plenty of cover and plenty of leaf surface for the awesome Treffy. The ficuses are also growing exponentially, as is to be expected. You know, they're creeping figs, so they be creepin'. But the crowning jewel of this terrarium lies right underneath the Dieffenbachia. Mushrooms. Magical, whimsical purple mushrooms have developed, you guys. And while that might be a cause for concern for like some terrarium keepers, mushrooms are actually a sign of very healthy soil. So if you have mushrooms in your terrarium, not only is it very, very whimsical and super cool, it kind of reminds me of the forest floor, but it's also a sign that your soil is doing very well in terms of bioactivity. Now, mushrooms are only going to feed off of dead or decaying matter. They're not going to attack actual living plants or moss in order to live or thrive. They also have a very short lifespans. These mushrooms are essentially the fruit of the fungus body, which lives in the soil itself. They look so whimsical.
And over here we have a sort of waterfall of moss, which is right next to this Boston fern, which is kind of getting a little bit leggy. The moss is spreading quite nicely as well, but not as well as I hoped. I have a mild obsession and would like literally everything to be completely covered in moss. It gives everything that nice aged look, you know? I also planted this pothos inside the cork bark, and it's growing quite nicely, considering it was a little stump. Next on our tour is the mysterious land of Pandora. Pandora was primarily and only planted with moss, Java moss to be specific, as it was a last-minute project that I did right before I was teleported. I left little Kodama, who are forest spirits that will look after Pandora in my absence, and look after Pandora they did, because 8 months later the Java moss exploded all over the top of the enclosure. A lush green forest of moss, growing suspiciously right next to the Kodama. Thank you, forest spirits, for looking after Pandora in my absence. Now we've come to my favorite transformation of them all. Quite a while back, a friend of mine asked me to help her build a terrarium. We created a naturalistic background made out of dragonstone and spiderwood, planted some petunia and some creeping figs and a whole lot of moss. And this is what it looked like after it matured. The mistake I made was not creating a deep enough substrate layer, so I had to redo the entirety of the forest floor. And this is what it looks like today. Lush green moss growing everywhere. The oak leaf creeping figs have been creeping all over the place. But the star of the show is the strawberry begonia that actually sent a few runners out. One to the background and one to the forest floor. The one on the forest floor actually developed a little baby. Neither the moss nor the parlor palm are doing the best here on the forest floor, but the mini Boston fern, the creeping figs, and the moss on the background are doing amazingly.
If you want to see how I made this terrarium, here you go. If you want to watch more videos like this, here's a playlist. And if you haven't done so yet, click this button, this one here. Yeah, that one.